What is up, Marsh Pod? Recording this, it is July 19th. We are a couple hours away from a exciting, influential SimWorld TV triple header, and we're, 14 hours, however many hours, removed from a handful or two really impactful, but a handful of good games, two of which were on SimWorld TV. We're going to talk about the latter of the two games on national television last night. Best Coast Ballers, a surprising and a surprisingly dominant win over Bay Area. Surprising in that this is a team that I would have expected Best Coast to not beat Bay Area. I've said this many times. Best Coast Ballers are a one-man crew that when the going gets tough, it's not always good. Lace Darius Outlaw took 28 shots again last night, but Lene Newman had 17 on 9 shots. Dre Ryder, 11 on 5 shots. Landon Coylton had 7 on 5 shots. A hyper-efficient game from the Best Coast Ballers, and a very inefficient game from Bay Area. Shot 36% from deep. Best Coast shot 60%, despite the fact the Bay Area made 7 to the 6 from Best Coast. But overall, it's just not a great game from the defensive side of things for Bay Area. They lose 80 to 69, and their offense was just not in rhythm. But here's the thing. This is a game that, in my opinion, it's fool's gold. It's fool's gold if you're adamant of a Best Coast Ballers championship caliberness, and it's a glance past, gloss over if you're a proponent of Bay Area as a championship team, and here's why. Best Coast Ballers could end up, depending on how tonight goes, with the number 1 seed. Obviously, the season does not end tonight, but they could be sitting at number 1 in the Legend Conference if Southeast Select were to lose at home, on the road to Lone Star Basketball. The Southeast Select team does not have the head-to-head against Best Coast. They lost 72-63 back on April 4th. Of course, that was with Best Coast with Mikey Williams when they were looking like potentially the most dominant team. They had 2 losses at the time of that one to Showtime and Bay Area, 2 divisional teams. So they've now split the division with Best Coast, with Bay Area. Their next game is against Showtime, so getting exciting with that one. But that's not the point here. They've got a chance to be the number 1 seed, depending on how things go, if Southeast Select doesn't take care of business over the last 4 games for them, and if Best Coast Ballers goes, let's say, 3-0 or whatever it may be. And if that were to happen, it would be, let's go and say it, a fraudulent number 1 seed. And here's why. They, even in a win that they got last night against Bay Area, they needed things to go so perfect. Because as great as Lace Darius Outlaw is, he was yet again inefficient. 12 of 28. This is a ongoing trend for Lace Darius Outlaw. And I'm not saying this is his fault, because I do think he could be the most talented player in SimWorld Hoops. 25 points, 6 boards, 4 assists. He had hyper-efficient quarters, especially in the in the second, when Best Coast started to pull away late in that second quarter. They built up what was a 5-point lead. They went into overtime up 12. That was Lace Darius Outlaw in the second quarter at his best. He scored late in that quarter 6 straight points. He hit his 1-3 of the afternoon. He was phenomenal. But in order for Best Coast to win this game, they needed a couple things to go according to plan, or rather exceedingly going to plan. They needed Lene Newman to be good. He was phenomenal. 17 points, 8 rebounds, 8 of 9 shooting. They needed somebody else to hit threes. Dre Ryder did that, making 3 of them. But he shot it at 4 of 5 overall. And then they needed somebody else to just provide something. Landon Coylton, 7 points. He had a burst there late in the first quarter where he scored, I think it was 5 straight points, a 3 and a 2. Sky Buckner-Williams has 6 points. 3 of those came from the free throw line. Actually, I think it was 4 of them because he went 1 for 1 from the floor and he ended with 6. But he was great. He had 3 steals on defense. But Best Coast needed this to go perfectly, and everything did. They got support from their secondary cast members that have just not done that all season long. But the support they got is unsustainable. Lene Newman and Dre Ryder are not going to go a combined 12 for 13 or for 14 from the floor 4 times in a row in the race to 1. It's not going to happen. We know what we're going to get from Lacedarius Outlaw. Every single night, it's almost a guarantee that Lacedarius Outlaw is going to score somewhere between 20 and 32 points. He's going to shoot between 40 and 50%, typically around that 44 to 45%. He was 43 last night. And he's going to put up massive numbers. He's going to get boards and he's going to get assists. The biggest question is, what does the rest of the team do? And in this case, Lene Newman and Dre Ryder rose to the occasion. But to assume that we're going to get that every game, the track record tells us that's not how it's going to work. Best Coast Ballers has been a struggling team for much of this season, ever since the loss of Mikey Williams. Have they played good in big games? Absolutely. They've been not as good as a Run DMV, but they've been a team that consistently rises to the occasion. But this 11-point win against Bay Area is the first time that we've really seen them be dominant from first to fourth quarter. They haven't been able to find somebody in the clutch outside of Lacedarius Outlaw that can make buckets. They lost to Rocky Mountain, granted by 4, but they lost nonetheless. They beat Lakeshore Drive by 7. They lost to Beyond the Arch by 4. They beat Indy Stripes by 11. They beat Bad Boys Basketball. They lose to Originators. They lose to Reigning Trays. They beat Cascadia. They lose to H-Town. The point of all that is that they haven't been able to play consistently elite basketball day in and day out for an extended period of time recently, now that this roster is as you would expect it to be. Meanwhile, you've got teams like the Originators, who just won 9 straight. Sure, they lose to AT Aliens. Sure, DeMario Duval has a phenomenal game. Sure, Kadarius Loftus struggles. But one loss there to AT Aliens is not an erasing of a 9-game winning streak. Meanwhile, Best Coast Ballers hasn't proven to us over the long haul that they can string together win after win after win. Yes, they beat Bay Area. Yes, that's impactful. But at the end of the day, if you cannot be a team that says, give us 3 weeks and we're going to win 7 of those games or 5 of those games or however many you get, we're going to win 80% of them, that's challenging. Meanwhile, Bay Area Bears, had they won that game, they too would have been in a position to take over first place in the division, first place in the conference. And they too might have been a little bit of a fool's gold champion. Why? Because they're on a 3-game losing streak. They continue to have the one issue that you wish you could have if you're Best Coast Ballers, in that they don't have a number 1 guy. They have a lot of really good players. Said this at the beginning, the biggest challenge of the season, the biggest challenge for Bay Area is, are they going to be able to find a guy that they can turn to late in a game, take over, and do it? The teams that are legitimate championship contenders have that guy, or at least fringe championship contenders have that guy. The Originators, they have that guy in DJ Wagner. Rocky Mountain, Justin Bell. Gotham 5, I think it's Mackenzie Mbako. Beasts of the East, Fareed Redmond. Meanwhile, your Bay Area, and you look at Southeast Select, not to discredit them, Trey Turner. Meanwhile, you look at Bay Area and say, is it going to be Royce Anderson? Is it going to be Caden Shipp? Have they figured out who that guy is? Have they figured out who to play through? Over the course of the season, we haven't seen that be true. Yes, Caden Shipp can have 12 points last night. Yes, Royce Anderson can have 15. Yes, they can go 10 for 20 from the floor. That's not bad. The challenge is they haven't established either of them to be the guy when you need a bucket. The other challenge for Bay Area is late in games or in second halves when they're falling behind, they have a propensity to just start chucking threes. Sometimes they work. Last night it didn't. That's why they shot 36%. Ronnie Shanahan, Blake Gillenwater, Curtis London, all going 1 for 1, along with Dime Hardaway. They're pulling up late in a game or in the second and third quarters in which they need points. They have no guy that can take somebody off the dribble for 4 quarters to win it. That's why Lacedarius Outlaw and Best Coast Ballers has an outside shot at winning it, because he can, in fact, do that. Of course, the challenges we talked about with Best Coast is they don't have the supporting staff. Meanwhile, for Bay Area, if you put Darius Outlaw on this team, they'd be unstoppable because they have the supporting staff. They have guys that have proven they can be the number 2, the number 3, the number 4 best players on a championship-winning team. What they haven't proven is that they have somebody that can be the number 1 guy. Yes, Kenny Shipp has looked like it. Yes, Royce Anderson has looked like it. Yes, Trey Hyman, despite his playstyle, could potentially be it. But neither of them is given the runway to do that. So as we look at the race to 1, the standings, for the most part, all but set in stone. The kind of the one things that we're wondering about is it Bad Boys or Cascadia? Feels pretty good that it's going to be Bad Boys. They've got a game and a half lead with 4 to play. Is it going to be Asia Pacific, AT Aliens, or Gulf Coast Lockdown? That one's still up in the air, but any one of those 3 teams is probably going to get in. Well, of course they're going to get in. They will get in, but it's one of those 3 teams to still figure out. Otherwise, the top 7 are basically figured out. We know who's going to be contending for the top seed in the Legacy Conference. Originators or Rocky Mountain. I'm not buying into the fact that the Originators might not get the top seed, but the game against Run DMV tonight will really decide that. I'm not totally buying into the fact that Southeast Select might not be the 1 seed, but a game tonight against Lone Star could decide that. But overall, we kind of know what we're getting. And when you look at these teams, you can kind of figure out who's a team I can see winning a championship and who's a team that I can't. And as it has been all season, the delineating line is, do you have a guy that can take over? If yes, proceed to question B. Do you have a supporting staff that can play good enough in a down night for your best player or in the minutes in which he's on the bench that you can survive or draw even? If yes, championship contender. If no, which I think a lot of these teams have to end up falling into, they're not. That means it's a small handful of teams that are capable of winning a championship, and regardless of the outcome last night, it seems to be more and more apparent that Best Coast and Bay Area are not those teams. So, one of them could end up with the top seed. Southeast Select is in the driver's seat, but they don't have the head-to-head against either. So, it could be that we look up at this and we see Best Coast, we see Bay Area as the number 1 seed. We could even see Showtime as the number 1 seed. And frankly, I'm not going to be concerned about it. Because right now it doesn't really feel like either of them have grabbed the bull by the horns to be a championship contender. And a quick in-game edit, Southeast Select with the head-to-head over Bay Area. So that loss by Bay Area hurts Southeast Select as much as it does them because now the margin of error much smaller. That's it. We got a big triple header as we've said tonight. I think a lot of questions are going to be continued to get answered and asked. Run DMV Originators. We know what we've talked about for both of them. Then it's Lone Star Southeast, Showtime, and Heartland to wrap it up. We will be back on Friday. Have a great Wednesday.